Hello and welcome. I'm Mitra Sorrell, Senior Vice President of Content at Phocuswright, and we are delighted to bring you this webinar along with our friends at Miles Partnership on the topic of artificial intelligence across travel and tourism. This is now the third year in a row that we have collaborated to bring you a webinar on AI and travel. We started back in 2023, just as generative AI was becoming a hot topic across the industry, and the innovation has really accelerated since then, which means we have a lot of content to share with you in the next hour. So let's jump right in. First, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have Mike Coletta. He is our Senior Manager of Research and Innovation at Phocuswright. C.A. Clark is Vice President of AI at Miles Partnership. He leads the North American cohort of AI Opener for Destinations. That's a global collaborative exploring the impact of AI on destinations, which has more than 100 participating organizations, and we're going to learn more about that later. And our third speaker is Chris Andrews, CEO and co-founder at Scrunch AI, a platform that helps businesses monitor and optimize how their brands appear in generative AI search results. Certainly a very important topic. As far as our agenda, we will start with trends and updates, and Mike will be giving a sneak peek at some of the latest Phocuswright consumer research about how travelers are using AI. Then CA will get into how AI is disrupting search and discovery, followed by an interview with Chris, who will be joined by Justin Gibbs, Director of Strategy and Insights at Miles. We will also allow time toward the end for your questions. So please, as we are going along, put your questions for our panelists in the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. Not the chat button, but the Q&A button, please. Also, everyone that is registered for this event will receive the recording to watch on demand, a PDF of the presentation deck, and a list of links and resources to help you continue learning and following developments. I should mention that all of Phocuswright's research reports, including the new consumer data Mike will be sharing, is available to our open access subscribers. You can learn more about that at the Phocuswright link that will be there on that resource page. Two of the Phocuswright resources I would like to call out briefly. You can scan these QR codes to learn more about our travel innovation and technology trends 2025 report and our new Agents Online event series. These are webinars that Mike hosts. He's done two so far on the impact of AI agents on company operations and also on the impact on the in-destination experience. Both of those are available for you to watch on demand, and Mike is going to be sharing some of the takeaways in just a few minutes. The next live event will be May 22nd on how AI agents are affecting distribution across the travel industry. And finally, I want to share a few news updates that we have been tracking at PhocusWire, and you will find the full articles on our website. As you can see there, just some of the headlines I picked to mention. In early April, Kayak announced Kayak AI. That is built with OpenAI's technology as a test lab for AI features. The site currently offers real-time flight status tracking. It can show every nonstop flight from specific airports, and it can provide hotel results for very specific natural language queries. Just a few weeks ago, Priceline launched a new trip intelligence tool called Neighborhood Edition. This is their effort to use AI to help customers get a deeper understanding of neighborhoods with AI-generated comparisons, tailored activity suggestions, and specifics on attractions, restaurants, entertainment, and more. And vacation rental platform Home2Go has added an AI filter so travelers can use natural language to search for properties. This is really just a sample. We're seeing so much activity happening across the industry. And as I'm saying, we know companies are really using AI, but it's always interesting to hear firsthand about their experience. In the last couple of weeks, the large public companies have filed their Q1 earnings reports, and in those calls that they do with Wall Street analysts, many of the CEOs have been talking about their work with AI. There you can see just a few that we're sharing. Booking Holdings CEO Glenn Fogel has expressed a lot of enthusiasm about the work they are doing with OpenAI, Microsoft, and Amazon Alexa. And he has talked about the power of combining Booking Holdings' proprietary data with these large language models. TripAdvisor is also leaning into partnerships, working with OpenAI and Perplexity. On its recent call, CEO Matt Goldberg talked about learnings from this work to reimagine its user experience and to understand how agentic AI can reshape trip planning and booking. And finally, Expedia Group CEO Ariane Gorin just announced the company's work with OpenAI's Operator and Microsoft Copilot. And at their Explore event just yesterday, she talked about how they are reimagining the traveler experience through chat, agents, creators, and short form video. And now, Mike, over to you for the AI trends and updates.
Yes, thank you, Mitra. So as Mitra mentioned, Phocuswright is covering 5 trends this year related to generative AI, which I'll be referring to as Gen AI for short. And I'll be walking through some of the trends. But first, I wanted to start with some fresh survey data to set the stage. So beginning with general usage of Gen AI among travelers across the US, UK, and France. Sorry, just there it is. This is data that just came back within the last couple of months. And we could see that from 2023 through current, usage just keeps going up and has now cracked the 50% mark in the US for 2025. That's on the red bars. And then in the US, on the dark blue bars here, the most popular use of Gen AI for planning or experiencing travel currently is while in destination for getting real-time recommendations at almost a third. While in the UK, that's on the light blue bars, there's higher usage for general research of things to do, tours and activities, as well as for destination research, right around a third. And in France, on the red bars, it's more popular to use it while in destination, specifically to learn about neighborhoods or sites. And in general, expectations about Gen AI offerings are rising. It's around a third or more in each country that expect travel sites to offer Gen AI chat for trip planning. But lower numbers, closer to a quarter, that have actually made trip decisions based on Gen AI recommendations. So I think this points to people finding it useful, but not trusting it all that much quite yet. All right, and then on to the trends. This year, we're closely examining these areas of impact of Gen AI on travel with a specific focus on autonomous agents. And if you're not familiar with autonomous agents yet, these are advanced AI systems that can not just provide information to you, but can use reasoning and complex decision making to independently accomplish goals and tasks for you. And they're just starting to gain traction, but many experts are saying they'll have an even bigger impact than Gen AI itself. So today we'll walk through 4 of the trends: the impact on company operations, the impact on the in-destination experience, and on travel distribution, and on travel marketing. And the 5th trend is the convergence of Gen AI and autonomous agents with digital ID. We won't have time to get into it today, but the idea is that digital ID is what will enable autonomous agents to represent people and make decisions and purchases on our behalf. And I actually did talk about digital ID a bit in the year in review and year ahead webinar we did with Miles Partnership in December. So you can refer to that, as well as what we wrote about it and all the trends in our free 2025 trends report, which Mitra mentioned will be in the resources that are sent out. So the first trend is on the impact of company operations, and this is focused a lot on autonomous agents. And so one of the best ways to convey the state of thinking here is to share this quote from Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who said just in January, "We are now confident we know how to build AGI as we have traditionally understood it." And AGI is referring to artificial general intelligence, which roughly means AI that's as smart as a human. And he continues, "We believe that in 2025, we may see the first AI agents join the workforce and materially change the output of companies." And actually, this is already happening. You may have noticed that OpenAI has launched their AI agent called Operator to the public, as have many other companies. And they're still very rudimentary, but they are starting to work and to be utilized. And in our first webinar in our trend series in March, we had 3 panelists on who are running travel companies and are at the forefront of implementing Gen AI in their own organizations. So for some real world examples, here's some quotes from them on how they're using it. Bobby Healy, a longtime travel industry veteran, currently running 2 companies, told us how the companies now have AI bots that are 100% doing the work that a really good data analyst would be doing. And Anna Jaffe of Moby talked about how their onboarding has been reduced essentially from 3 months to 3 days. And Tim Henschel of Hotel Planner shared that their voice reservation agent is currently handling 50,000 calls per day. All very impressive and tangible results that are absolutely giving them competitive advantages. And for a quick snapshot of the state of agentic AI, as it's often referred to, a January KPMG survey of 100 senior executives at large enterprises showed that 12% of companies are already deploying AI agents, 37% are in pilot stages, and just over half are actively exploring their use. So it's really not just speculation that AI agents are being rolled out and having an impact on how companies operate. It is already happening, and I truly believe the most successful companies of the future will run most of their operations through AI. Now, the second trend is the impact on the in-destination experience, very relevant to a lot of the audience today. And the idea here is that the advanced computer vision capabilities of Gen AI allow it to understand surroundings and physical context, and the advanced real-time voice capabilities enable very natural conversations. So together, these stand to revolutionize how travelers tour neighborhoods and sites of interest, get recommendations, and interact with locals. So in a study last summer, we asked US travelers about some futuristic concepts like using AI as a tour guide. And there's not a lot of high interest yet, with 33% of travelers being extremely or very interested, but there's not also much total disinterest, with only 19% being not at all interested. And this is about what I might expect for a concept that's still very new to travelers, and they probably don't fully understand it from what we're asking them in a survey. Visuals help a lot in order to get it. So to help give a sense of what we're talking about, I wanted to play a short clip that OpenAI published actually about a year ago now, kind of a long time in the world of AI, but gets the point across nicely. So here it is.
Is the king in residence at the moment?
Yes, it looks like the king is in residence right now. The Royal Standard flag is flying above Buckingham Palace, which is the signal that the monarch is present. How exciting to be there while the king is home.
Okay, so you could see how ChatGPT interpreted what he was looking at and was able to talk about it in context. A pretty basic demonstration, but shows the potential for how it could be used as a real-time tour guide. You could really just look at anything and it can recognize, most of the globe at this point. And all the LLM companies are just getting better and better at this type of thing, especially Google. And I pulled some quotes from our second webinar in our trend series from April that I thought were insightful and relevant. First, Jeanette Rausch, SVP of Innovation and Chief AI Officer at Brand USA, talked about the benefit of DMOs being able to collect more first-party data through Gen AI conversations. And Alex Bainbridge, CEO of Atora, who's building a tour platform powered by AI tour guides as well as autonomous vehicles, talked about how he sees the ideal tour solution of the future augmenting human guides with AI capabilities that can increase personalization, as an example, like knowing what stories a particular group might want to be interested in. And Jeanette said something about autonomous agents that I thought was worth playing, so you can hear it from her.
But I'm like, if perhaps the future of DMOs is taking all of this local information and then packaging it so that it's more accessible to whatever personal assistant or non-personal assistant you like.
And she's referring to AI agents there. So highly speculative, of course, but she's pretty convinced as to how impactful personal AI agents or assistants could be, including the possibility of rewriting the role of the DMO to feed AI assistants the information they need about a destination. And then the third trend is on distribution, or how and where travel will be sold as Gen AI tools become more and more popular. And ChatGPT is still very small compared to Google as far as the search market goes. But OpenAI and ChatGPT are very influential in driving the AI user experience. So what they do matters. And ChatGPT is also growing very, very fast. And I know CA is going to share some related stats on this. But just as of April, ChatGPT began integrating shopping right inside the platform. And starting with simple products, like in this case, you see a coffee maker, But we have to wonder how long until the purchasing of travel is directly integrated. And there are some big questions on how this would be facilitated and whether OTAs or suppliers would benefit more. And as Mitra mentioned, we'll be diving into all that on our next webinar, just coming up on May 22nd, which is on the topic of distribution. But the bottom line is these platforms will increasingly influence where travel is booked. And this is a good example. I come across a lot of, interesting examples on LinkedIn. This is a search in ChatGPT where the user asked about a vacation home for a bachelorette party. And ChatGPT proactively asked them about their preferences, including where they want to book. Do they want options from Airbnb or Vrbo or boutique rental agencies or all of the above? And then in the results for the first property that it recommended, it pointed out that booking direct could save 15% versus Airbnb fees. So, these AI assistants, they're going to try to be as helpful as they possibly can to us, first and foremost, so they can, get us using them more and more. And this is a perfect example for travel of pointing out how to save money, which everybody wants. But these companies also have to make money, and they may increasingly be compensated and influenced through advertising. So there's not a lot of advertising going on yet in the AI platforms, but here's another example. It's pretty interesting. I found on LinkedIn where this person was trying to engage in a facetiously serious conversation about whether ChatGPT is going to take over the world or not, and was asking something about statistics. But ChatGPT slipped in a DoorDash ad. So this is just an anecdotal example, but advertising might be coming sooner than we think to these platforms. And in the recent surveys I mentioned in my first slides, we asked about interest in making bookings using Gen AI. And there's some decent interest among travelers in booking within a Gen AI platform once that is an option, or to let an AI agent or assistant like Operator book for them on the web. Right around a third say they agree or strongly agree that they would do these things across the US, UK, and France. So it's not like everyone is saying there's no way they would do this. Our early data shows that the interest is there. And now on the impact on marketing and search and discovery, which CA will be talking about more. Here's some recent stats from SEO platform BrightEdge on how much Google's AI overviews are growing. And this is referring to those AI generated answers that appear at the top of the search pages now. So this is just at the end of April. They spiked over 100% with almost 94% of new overviews that are showing up being for location-specific activities. So things continue to change very fast here and increasingly for the in-destination space. And these AI overviews seem to be hurting information-based websites the hardest. So this report from Data Reportal, based on similar web data, shows huge traffic declines between March 2022 and March 2025 for Wikipedia in particular, and mainly news sites. But you have to assume the trend is similar for any sites that provide content. And then at least part of the reason is because people can get that content summarized by Gen AI in those platforms. So pretty big implications here for DMOs and travel content sites. A lot of you may be seeing this already. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing what CA has to say about this. And then I want to end on a point about AI agents, circling back to that point about shopping being integrated. In the last few weeks, Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal all launched agentic payment solutions, per that headline on the right side. And with these new solutions, a big part of the puzzle falls into place in terms of enabling AI agents to securely make purchases on our behalf. It'll still take a while for these agents to earn our trust to do so as they roll out. And I think a good parallel is probably how hesitant people were to make purchases on the internet for a good 10 years or so. But then it became ubiquitous once that trust was established and convenience outshined hesitancy. And I thought this post on LinkedIn by the CMO at Visa in conjunction with this announcement was significant for its declaration that marketing is rapidly evolving from B2B or B2C to B2 AI, meaning we're already in some ways and more will be marketing to people's AI agents as opposed to people directly. So meaning as people get comfortable with these AI agents, they'll give their agents a task, and for travel, this will get progressively specific over time as the agents learn to ask better questions, to gather more information, like the example I showed, really have a conversation and get to know people, incorporate more personal data, incorporate considerations like how to maximize loyalty points or credit card points. And the agent will bring back some good options. And by the way, we'll be able to present them in better and better formats, like building an interactive website for the traveler to browse and filter the options that the agent is bringing back for them. Because not everything is great, in conversational context. Sometimes it's just easier to view and click, or even creating a custom video of the options. You can just sit back and watch. Once the traveler's happy, they'll say, okay, go ahead and book it all for me. And that's the connection to digital ID, which will have their sensitive personal information and ID documents and payment info securely stored and able to be acted on by the agent to pass it along to the end suppliers or retailers. And this could be done for lots of different purchase types. So in that way, it's looking like AI agents will become the conduits for a large swath of online commerce. And the best travel marketers will know how to surface and present content for the agents to properly digest and present it back to the traveler. And I think that's essentially what Jeanette was postulating in that clip that I played. So as I've implied, there's really some huge shifts happening already here in search and discovery in particular, and I've really just scratched the surface. So I'm going to pass it over to CA now to dive a little deeper on all this. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mike. All right, so right now we're going to do a quick live poll. This is the same poll we have run in the last two sessions of this AI one. So the questions you're going to be asked here is, how would you describe your organization's investment of time and money into AI? And those are really in the sort of learning and testing and implementation answers. And then there's also a question there about what you're using AI for inside your organization. So I'll give you just a second to take a look at those questions and answer those questions. Then we'll look at the answers and maybe find some interesting insights compared to last year's answers. All right, let's take a look at the results there. All right, there we go. We have just learning at this stage is 33%, which is actually slightly lower than it was last time. So we have some moving, most of the movement there, just looking at my notes, looks like we moved from learning into modest implementations. So that's actually kind of a big shift there. The learning was a few percentage points higher the last time we looked at that. And then the second one, we'll take a look at what's going on there. Interesting there, the content marketing and advertising, significant shift there. We were about 50% on content last time, and big shift into content at 88%. And software development, which was only 8% last time, is now up to 25%. So definitely some shifts that we would expect there in terms of people continuing to dive into how those technologies are being used inside your own organization. While we're talking about surveys, we are actually running a survey right now, which is the state of AI use in destinations. So if you are a DMO and you're on this call, we would love to have your responses to this survey. This is the second time we've run this. It is in conjunction with AI Opener for destinations, but is open to all destinations. So if you are a destination, please use the QR code, or we will send a link in the follow-up email, and we would love to have your response to that. You will get a copy of the results if you answer this 8 to 10 minute survey. Moving on, we're going to dive into, as soon as my slide comes up. We'll dive into the AI impacts to search and discovery. And so as has been mentioned, one of the things that we do is AI Opener for Destinations, which is a collaborative exploration of a bunch of these different topics. If you want to know more about that, you go to AIOpenerForDestinations.com. Each month, we try to answer a different question that is sort of at the intersection of AI and travel. And the most recent session that we did of AI Opener was answering this very question, which is how is AI changing search and what does it mean for my digital presence, website, content, things like that. So what I'm going to try to do is compress that sort of 2-hour conversation into just a few minutes here, but we're going to break it down into 3 different sections. We're first going to try to understand what's actually happening in search in terms of what that landscape looks like. And then secondly, we're going to take a look at how AI search works and is distinct from traditional search. And then lastly, we'll identify a few things that we should be watching and doing as it relates to that. So just to cut right to the heart of this, and we've certainly heard this in some of the other things that that Mike was talking about there. For travel brands and especially DMOs, we're seeing a 20 to 30% decline in organic traffic when we compare that year over year. This is SimpleView's public data insights dashboard, and you can see for this very week, it is down 20% year over year in terms of organic traffic. That is not as consistent from what we see for other kinds of travel brands like hotels or experiences, but they are certainly not immune to those traffic losses. And the reason, so where does that traffic going? And the answer is nowhere, right? This is sort of the problem. This is the problem that's called zero click in search. And this has been an issue for a while, but has really been exacerbated by Google's own AI overviews. And that's really where most of that traffic impact is coming from. So this study from Ahrefs, which is pretty recent, looked at 300,000 different keywords. And in that one, they found that when an AI overview is shown, the organic clicks, the click-through rate goes down by 34%. So that's a pretty significant decline in click-throughs when an AI overview is shown. And so that's a lot of really the core of this problem. There are definitely issues that are going on that have to do with the behavioral change and how people use AI and how they use that to search. And we'll look at that in just a minute. But honestly, a lot of that sort of organic traffic problem that we're seeing isn't so much people really leaving Google or not doing those kinds of searches at all, as much as it is those searches kind of being answered in a zero click state by Google's AI overviews. And, based on some of Mike's earlier data, it sounds like we might actually even see that rise a little bit higher if we looked at data in Q2. So this is data from BrightEdge, and this looks at by industry, and you can see that travel is actually not as impacted as some of the other travel or other verticals here. So like healthcare, education, places. What this chart shows is the percentage of search result pages that show an AI overview. And so if you look at travel, at the end of 24, we were seeing about 30% of those search result pages that had to do with travel had an AI overview. And then in Q1, it was down to 24%. And then based on some of that other data that Mike mentioned, we might expect to see that go up again in Q2. Remarkably similar, those numbers, 30 and 24%, to the kinds of declines that we see in organic traffic in that sector. And then there's all kinds of other things that are happening that will sort of continue to accelerate that. So you might have seen that Google Labs AI mode experiment, and you can go see this if you want to go into Google Labs. You can look at turn this on as an experiment. And this basically replicates the kind of experience that you would get if you were asking ChatGPT a search question instead of the kind of traditional, 10 blue links approach that we get from Google. So this certainly has the potential to further escalate the disruption here if Google decides to push this more. Right now, it's really just an experiment, and I would have to guess that based on the advertising model that they have, it's unlikely that this is going to get pushed real aggressively. But this is definitely the challenge that Google has, is that they are trying to compete with a ChatGPT interface, which we'll look at in just a second, that is very different from the way that search works. And they have to figure out how to balance that. So this is an attempt to say, okay, well, if you want to answer your search queries to work that way, then we can do that. And here's an option to have that same sort of conversational experience with a search. Just to put the perspective on this, though, so let's back up a level and just say that even with these declines, right, and I'm not downplaying those declines at all, but even with those declines, remember that organic is still the largest source of traffic for travel and tourism websites. These are from our own data studio, looking at just sort of a sampling. These were not cherry-picked results, but that, you know, you're still getting 50% of the traffic that is coming in is from organic. It's still the single largest source. It's still critically important. And even though Google's market share is the lowest it's been in a decade, it's still, you know, 90%, 89% of the global search market, right? People are still going to Google. They are still doing primarily, right, like overwhelmingly going to Google to do their searches. That's where they're finding out information. Organic search is still an important part of that. SEO, you know, is not dead. It is absolutely you know, a critical part of what your overall plan is. You still need to have content that resonates with your audience. You still need to have indexers come in and search that. Like, a lot of those fundamentals have not changed. However, it does mean that we're probably at a point where we need to start to shift into what we think is coming next and pay more attention to the kinds of behaviors that people display when they are doing search, which brings us to our second section here. So we're going to talk a little bit about how AI search and kind of the differences between how that works from traditional search. So first of all, AI interactions tend to be significantly longer than the average search term, and by significantly, I mean 25 times longer. So the average number of words in a Google search is 3.5, and the average number of words in a ChatGPT interaction is 86, and that doesn't even count the sort of follow-up questions that you might ask. So the kind of the context and the volume of information that is being exchanged there is dramatically different when we talk about kind of traditional search versus an AI search. And that means that, you know, things that we have focused on in the past, like keywords, probably need to shift to things that are more like topic clusters, right? And we've sort of known that from an SEO perspective. This is just kind of making that a more urgent shift because of that sort of volume of the words that someone is putting in. So if we look at what a result looks like, and these are not apples to apples at all, and that's part of what I'm trying to illustrate here, is that the result that you get from a talking to a chatbot and a search that happens inside there is dramatically different from what you get on a Google page. So this is the simplest example where the AI is responding using only its pre-trained knowledge. So there's my 86-word prompt at the top that is about travel. And then the AI response uses, right, this is a compression of essentially all human knowledge, but certainly all of the stuff that's on the web. You know, is being compressed into this model. And so it uses that knowledge to be able to answer that question. And, you know, is remarkably good at doing that as long as it's the kinds of things that aren't, you know, maybe affected by up-to-date information, right? How tall is the Eiffel Tower, or, you know, what kinds of destinations do people go to? That sort of generalized information. So this is stuff that doesn't use search. This is the AI model answering from the knowledge that it has itself. If we go to sort of the next stage of that, which is when search is engaged, and you can do this either by hitting that little blue button at the bottom that says search, or in circumstances where the model determines that it really should be looking at its own index. Now you have a scenario where you have that 86-word prompt, and then you'll get that little searching the web sort of scanner thing there, and then it will come up with a bunch of different sites that it is considering, and then it will synthesize an answer. So that's using its own internal knowledge, but it's also using access to a search index. For ChatGPT, that is, or was, primarily Bing's index because of their relationship with Microsoft. Increasingly, they are using their own internal index, which we'll see in just a second, to do those. Anthropic's Claude just introduced a search that works this way. They use Brave's index, as in the Brave browser. And then, of course, Google has their own, Google Gemini has their own index that does that. So you have the core knowledge of the model, and then it's taking the search index and it's sort of combining those and trying to synthesize a result out of that. And then there's a third category of this. And the third category is, under certain circumstances, the AI model will actually go out and directly access your page in real time. So you can do that yourself. If you can trigger that with a specific URL where you ask it to go out and look at what is on that page. But there are other circumstances where it's going to look at that index, find some pages, and that's going to pull those down directly. And essentially what happens there is it's taking the content from your page and putting that directly into the prompt context for its answer. And so there's a little bit different scenario that happens in that third level. Now, each one of these things requires a different bot. And so just starting from the bottom here, the AI crawler is that bulk content harvesting for training. So anything that goes into that is not going to show up in, in real time. That's going to be months and months before you would see the impact of what happens there. The one in the middle, the blue one there, is AI search, and that's this sort of continuous indexing, just like we're used to Google doing, except now there's a whole lot more of them. And then that top one is the AI assistant, where a user has asked something, and that the model is actually going out and fetching user prompted or one-off results that are coming directly from your page. And this has led to a proliferation of bots, sometimes called gray bots, because they are neither sort of good or bad bots, right? A good bot like Google, we're used to how that works. Bad bots are, trying to look for harvesting email addresses or something for spam. And so those two are relatively clear. These are kind of in between, right? These are for AI. There's questions about like whether that's ethical and like whether you want it to be indexed and like all these other questions. But the main problem is because all of these labs are competing with each other, there's a huge volume of the requests that are coming through. And that has caused headaches for website hosting, because now we suddenly have all of these bots that are coming through. So you may have seen that earlier in the year or last year, where there was this kind of huge influx of those bots. It's obviously useful to know what is hitting your site. So if you have Cloudflare, Cloudflare actually has a really useful tool that is called AI Audit that will show you how and when all of the different AI bots are hitting your site, and that can be really useful. And they also have some tools if you are a paid user of Cloudflare, enterprise level rather. They have some tools that you can use to control the frequency of those bots with a lot more granularity than using something like robots.txt, which is what we're going to talk about in a second. So thirdly, then, let's identify a few things that we probably should be thinking about and watching and doing as it relates to this. And we'll just go through these real quickly here. The first one is you ought to know how the AI models answer questions about your brand. If nothing else, you should be doing that manually. Hopefully you're doing that already. The second one is you can set up analytics. So if you use Google Analytics or whatever kind of analytics you use, you can set that up, try to look at, when those user agents come in and kind of how frequent that is. And then there are a bunch of platforms that do a much better job at scale. And we're fortunate to have one of those, the co-founder and CEO of Scrunch, with us today, which I'm going to get to in a second. We'll ask some questions. Chris Andrew can answer some of those, but there are lots of platforms, Scrunch being, an excellent example of that can help you do this kind of monitoring at scale. Definitely important for you to know what the models are saying about your brand, because you can't do anything about it unless you know what is happening there. Number two is you want to validate your technical fundamentals. This isn't any different than it used to be, but because there's a huge volume of bots that are coming in, it's a really good time to go back and make sure that you're doing all of those things right. You're staying out of the way. You're using clean, well-formatted HTML. Your content display doesn't require JavaScript or lazy loading or something else that is going to prevent that content from being indexed by the bot. You want to use relevant markup for things like events and articles and products and FAQs if you can, if it makes sense to do that. Those are all really important things. Again, not dramatically different than they used to be from an SEO perspective, just maybe more urgent now because of the volume of the search bots that are coming through. And speaking of those bots, you'll want to review your robots.txt file to see how that is functioning. You're going to want to decide which of those bots you're blocking or allowing and to what content. So really good time to review that. We've kind of gotten used to it just being like, well, we'll let Google take care of all of those things. Now you got a lot of these that you got to deal with. You want to make sure that your sitemap is accurate. And then if you have the option, you want to set access limits to that. Robots.txt doesn't do that. Cloudflare and some of the other sort of top level services let you do that, where you can say, I'm going to let all the bots in, but only at this frequency on a daily basis, so that I don't run into a situation where they're just sort of eating up all my bandwidth. Number four then is shifting stakeholder focus to new KPIs. So this is really important. You want to begin conversations that move away from page views and sessions and move towards things like impressions, awareness, and conversions. This is a moving target and it's going to change. But thinking about what those kinds of KPIs are and how you measure your success and how you talk about your success is going to be really important to make that shift with your stakeholders. There's a really interesting report that Mike actually recommended to me from Growth Memo that is pretty recent. We can put the link in the chat or in the email when we send that out if you want to take a look at that. Some pretty interesting stuff in there. But one of the quotes that I thought was interesting is it said visibility, not raw referral traffic, is becoming the main currency of organic search. And so that's shifting this, like, referral traffic or click-throughs, kind of coming down, and then thinking more about like visibility. And particularly for destinations, that isn't necessarily the worst thing. It's just hard to measure, right? Because in the end, it was important that people came to the destination, not necessarily that they came to the website. So having that information be present in these searches, whether that's AI overviews or ChatGPT or whatever, still has an enormous amount of value, and maybe arguably has even more value than showing up in a 10 blue links kind of a search engine result page. Number 5 is to try to focus on the things that AI isn't good at, which is human experience. So a chatbot can't tell you what it felt like when you visited somewhere, and that's what people remember about travel, right? Is how it made you feel. And so that's a really important component of this when we think about content, right? Like the one thing that an AI can't really do is tell you what a real human felt or experienced in your travel product. And so we want to think about what those are. We could extend that into things like insider or local knowledge, local events, things that are happening on property, right? The bot could tell you about a hotel, but it can't tell you what's happening on that property today. And so those are the kinds of content that become valuable. And then this is really emphasizing EEAT, which, has been important in SEO, but that's experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness of the content of the author of that content. So having real humans who are named and having them talk about their experience is definitely content that makes sense and that you should probably be thinking about. And then lastly, I will leave you with this sort of big sort of conceptual thing that says that because of the inherent kind of objectivity of these models, if you want ChatGPT or some other AI to recommend your destination, hotel, or experience as the best for, let's say, families from Atlanta, increasingly you're going to have to actually be the best destination, hotel, or experience for that target market. This has always been true to some extent. You had to set the right expectations, and if you didn't set those expectations and meet them when people came to experience your product, then they figured it out pretty quickly. I think this is just sort of accelerating that up to another level where the AI models have an enormous amount of knowledge. And so it's really hard to kind of get away with things that you can't deliver in the destinations. I think increasingly it will be important to think about beyond just the kind of the content that we're putting together and SEO and keywords and stuff like that into like, are we actually delivering on the right expectations? Are we setting the right expectations? And then when people visit our travel product, our destination, our hotel, are we delivering on what those expectations are? Okay, so now I'm going to invite both Chris Andrew and Justin Gibbs in to have a little bit of a discussion. So Chris Andrew, as I mentioned, CEO and co-founder at Scrunch AI, which is a tool for keeping track of how your brand shows up, and Justin Gibbs, who is our Director of Strategy and Insights at Miles and is kind of our SEO guru, which is obviously pretty important to this. So thank you both for joining.
Thank you, CA.
And I will dive right into a couple of different questions here. So I'm going to start out with a question for Chris. So I think there is, I sometimes hear an assumption that that AI is really just taking the stuff that's on the web and kind of regurgitating it and then spitting it back out again, based on the kinds of things that you see. Can you talk about how large language models maybe decide and find information, and then how they synthesize that information in a way that is different from just sort of repeating what is found?
Yeah, thanks, CA. Justin, good to see you guys. And what an awesome walkthrough. Like that's everybody on the call, you're fortunate to have kind of that level of depth and clarity from CA in terms of, from a technical perspective, what's happening in the space. It's great to see the clarity and kind of the evolving narrative and story here. In terms of regurgitating content, I kind of think of regurgitating content as spitting up exactly what you pulled in. And I think what's novel about AI is that it synthesizes the way we try to do as humans. And so if you think that the old world of search was you and I going to a ranked list of URLs, clicking on the 5 that we deemed relevant, knowing they were probably pretty biased, and trying to synthesize in our brains which of those 5 articles that I read was most relevant. It's exactly what's happening when a GPT user agent, a crawler, as CA had on the prior slides, is doing on our behalf. And so what's different in this world is that those crawlers are looking for consistency, not just from your presence. Gone are the days of like, okay, your site ranks well. You need to have a consistent presence across your brand account. The third parties and partners that represent you, the ecosystem of where your brand is present becomes more critical than ever. And so that's why we built Scrunch AI as a platform to maintain observability and insights into where you need to be present and how. But the things I'd be keeping top of mind are it's doing the opposite. It is not regurgitating your content. It is taking what it believes relevant from your content, mixing it and synthesizing it with multiple sources across the web to answer a question. So that's kind of the core shift that I would prioritize.
I think that's a lot of the challenge that we face here too, is that the way that we've sort of developed SEO over decades was very much about trial and error. And there were sort of, not that I'm trying to say that it is simplistic, because it's not, but there were sort of more linear relationships between the kinds of things that we did and the results. This generative AI, just sort of by its nature, makes that wildly more complicated, right? Because you don't know exactly what kinds of answers you're getting or how the influence is happening in there. So this is a question for Justin. You're obviously on top of the kinds of KPIs that our clients at Miles monitor and pay attention to. Do you want to talk a little bit more in depth about how we should be redefining success metrics to better align with where we think things are going?
Yeah, that's a good question, and certainly one that I have to address like on a daily basis. So I think in one instance, we just need to back up. If we have largely reported on sessions and users on our website, we see that going down this year, right? We've kind of reiterated that over and over. But we can still look at impressions. So impressions are a very classic media metric. We report on those all the time. And I think if our brand is still having those impressions, whether it be in Google search or somewhere else, those are still very valuable placements. So we're still being seen, we're still being referred to. But I think something else to just think about is really realigning those expectations. A lot of our clients kind of set those annual goals. Maybe it's a fiscal year and you set those goals in October. Well, that's right around the time that those AI overviews really started impacting us. And so just be very straightforward and upfront with realigning those. We are not going to hit that 10% year over year increase. If we're down 20%, that's probably okay this year. But I don't want to see our clients or anyone in this industry kind of rush and do something sloppy to try and make up for that additional 20%. It's happening to us, and it's happening to all of us together. But then looking at other things like, our conversion rates, I think people who are willing or looking to make a purchase or an action on a website, those folks will still make it to your site, right? So we should actually be seeing increases in a lot of those conversions and engagement metrics, because those who are looking for those very quick answers and may have just got that answer and bounced very quickly anyways, they aren't going to be the people who are going to make it to your website. So look at improving the engagement rate and looking at those things I think will be more valuable.
Awesome. We do have some questions that we want to get to. So I want to get to some audience questions. I want to give both of you though an opportunity to sort of respond to the based on the things that we see that are happening here, what do organizations need to think about doing differently than the way that we have thought about this traditionally, in order to make sure that they are visible and relevant for visitors? And we'll start with you, Chris, and then we'll end up with Justin.
Yeah, excellent. And first of all, very much agree with Justin's mindset shift of ultimately very few of us are getting paid for the number of visitors. We're getting paid on conversion. Like at the end, the company's trying to drive to conversion. So if your conversion numbers are higher from AI referral traffic, that's a great place to be, right? That's kind of what you want to be focusing on. I think in terms of what I'm thinking about in the new world, it's put yourself in the mindset, like if you could, of an AI user agent, right? So if you've been a marketer or a content production team member for a destination or travel agency or whatever it might be, you've been largely writing for the Google bot. And if we think about the incentives of the Google bot over the last 10 or 20 years, we know what they are. They've gotten us to the internet that we have today, which are blog posts filled with keywords, backlinks. These things are still relevant in a world where Google remains a dominant player, but that's not how humans really want to read. And AI, large language models, read more like we do, right? They're looking for clarity of intent. They're looking for simple structure. They're also struggling with a lot of technical components on websites. So it's been pretty well communicated that if your website is full of JavaScript, videos, images, interactive things that are pretty prominent in a travel category, if you do not have text that is clearly legible somewhere on your page, a lot of the intent of your page is not going to be picked up in the model, and it's going to impact your citation rate. Ultimately, you want your brand mentioned, you want your content linked to, so that you can drive, as Justin said, to that conversion. And we do see from our customers, a 10 to 20% drop in traditional Google traffic and referral traffic from AI engines increasing rapidly, with a 2 to 4x increased conversion rate from AI referral visitors, because they've done their research off channel. By the time they land on your site, they're ready to book the tour, book the hotel, book the reservation. They're ready to engage. And so the biggest thing I'm encouraging marketers to do is think like an AI crawler. Go to the webpage, go to your webpage and be like, okay, can't watch the video. The models are going to keep getting better, but they're trying to turn everything into language. And today they don't have the time to do it. They're not converting your video. They're not converting your PDF. They're not converting your image. They will in the future, but they will always prioritize efficiency of structured, clear text to arrive at that answer. So we see companies bringing more data assets online. We see consistency of message being added to pages. So let's say you've got a 20-page simple site. Articulating who you are, why you do it, what the value is of your service or offering is a reminder to the model of like, that's what I'm engaging with. I'm on a page for a zipline tour company. They're the best at what they do in this region. Flipping that mindset is a big piece of the opportunity.
All right, Justin, you got like 30 seconds.
All right, and I have like
Take it away.
So I think
Brilliant.
part of it is I'm using a Colab notebook, like a very basic Python script to strip out content from our web pages. And I think that has given me a good idea of what a bot may see versus what I see. And then I'm using that to synthesize summaries. And if the notebook cannot synthesize a summary that makes sense to that page, the AI is probably not getting a very good example of it either. And as I've gone through, I've kind of done a pretty good exercise this week with one of our clients. They had a page about boutique hotels. They had 6 very great boutique hotels. They still ranked in ChatGPT for that query, but they were very low on the list. The site that ranked the highest also had a lot of great boutique hotels, and they had a lot of reasons why those specific hotels were in their lists, where we just rely on our grids to populate that content. Now I'm not giving any context to why I've chosen those, and the chatbot doesn't really have a whole lot to chew on. Was that 30 seconds? That's probably a minute. Cool.
That works for me. That was great. All right. Thank you both. There are questions, so stick around because I know that there will be questions for both of you to answer. Real quickly, I think we have a couple of slides on upcoming webinars that I'll just mention real quickly. So there is a Technology Trends powered by State of the American Traveler, which is a 20-year-long set of research that we have done. That's Tuesday, June 24th. That is the link for that. And then we real quickly go to the next one, which will be, again, with future partners, the State of International Traveler 2025, which is Wednesday, May 21st. So that's actually coming up a little in just a week or so. And that is the link for that one. And I will hand it back to Mitra to kind of negotiate the QA.
Okay, wow, so much very, very interesting and useful information provided by all of you. And we do have some questions and very little time, so I'm going to talk kind of fast. And just a quick one that maybe is a quick answer, probably for our friends at Miles. There's a question about whether there are any case studies of destinations incorporating AI or a white paper on strategies for tourism marketing utilizing AI. And I guess I'd say if there is, maybe that can be added to the resources if it's not already there. I don't know. CA, if you know of any.
Yeah, no, I'll answer that one. Not yet. So
Okay.
I have there are white papers that we have in mind to put together. A lot of the problem is this space moves really, really quickly, and so
Yeah.
each time you sort of start a like, oh, I'm going to put together an answer on this, and then you're like, oh, no, that's needs to be sized. But definitely part of what we're doing. So we'll be pushing that out on LinkedIn and other places as we begin to put that together.
Okay, for sure. A question on how much do you think advertising will influence how an LLM responds? Any thoughts there? I don't know, maybe if Chris or Justin, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on it. I think one thing we've heard just looking at what models are doing, GPT has largely said they're trying to avoid ads currently. And I think if you think why, they're swallowing up such huge consumer demand as they try to build trust and credibility, and ads complicate that. So as long as they can be driving enough subscription revenue, API revenue, I think we'll see more and more made available free. I have no doubt ads will come. Contrast that with Perplexity. They're the upstart. They need revenue. They're advertising because they need people to come in and figure out a commercial model. But I think what we're going to see is if GPT becomes more of like an operating system for companies in our lives, maybe the benefit is that we all get to search for free for a longer period of time because ads have some context. They're designed to sway you, and I think the models are really trying to accumulate more trust in consumer mindshare. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a huge challenge with that with the advertising. Like if you think about this, there's only so much you can do, right? Like you can't interrupt a conversation to be like, wait a minute, let me sell you this garage door opener, right? Like it just doesn't work in the flow of the conversation, which definitely makes it a lot more challenging for advertising.
I've thought about this a little more subtly, like, maybe a Marriott is the best fit, but there's a Hilton nearby, and maybe the algorithm would have recommended it or maybe not, but it is being compensated. So the AI is making sure it is a trusted, good recommendation, but it's getting compensation there. So there could be some sort of middle ground. I think there'll be a lot of that sort of new areas that open up here that they're hard to anticipate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll probably still be talking about that on future webinars for sure. That final question very quickly. To what extent is an AI LLM tailoring results to what it cumulatively knows of the user versus a broad-based result? And if it's not doing that at scale, when do you anticipate that happening and what are the implications? Probably a complex question for the last couple of minutes, but any quick response there?
That's definitely a Chris question. Oh, sorry. Or Justin, take it.
I was going to say, I don't know if I have a percentage, but anecdotally, I do notice when I ask it more sensitive questions, it says, hey, Justin, and then it does address me with things that it knows about me, where if I'm asking more fact-based questions, it does not do that. So it does seem to address certain sensitive topics with some level of sympathy. And if, do yourself a favor and ask it to roast you, it'll be pretty fun.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure, and Mike, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I think you can go in and also enable some of those settings, right? Like I think you can say, please refer to me as, and give it a name you want it to call you, and like tell it a little bit about yourself. And so,
yeah, you can very much instruct it. And
I think what's interesting here is sorry, I think just one thing to note here, GPT is the only platform with meaningful memory built in, right? So you're not bringing context from other conversations in a Perplexity. But what that means is in our platform, for instance, we model out personas that you sell to, right? So maybe you've got the young traveling family, you have the sophisticated business executive. They're asking different questions, getting different answers and different citations. And that will only increase over time. Like I definitely believe that gone are the single SERP page of results with a rank. Got to forget that. Literally every question has a different answer. Every persona will have a different answer. I think we're months, not years, from that memory becoming critical to say, okay, this is who Chris is, where he's based. The answer is fully customized to me. Did you have content that matched me to the persona? That is absolutely where it's going. And I think it's going to be a very, very exciting web because it's more personalized. It's based on the intent, which is not just spoken, but is learned over time.
And I
Okay,
answered that in
wonderful.
the Q&A.
We are out of time, I'm afraid. We need to wrap up here. If we can just go to the slide, just to remind everyone, you will get these links with a lot of resources there to continue learning about all of this. And of course, we at Phocuswright will be digging in even deeper on AI and its impact on the industry at our 2 upcoming events in Barcelona in June and in San Diego in November. You can scan those QR codes, which will be in the deck you get, to get more information and register to join us. And we will be back with our friends at Miles in December for the 10th edition of our webinar that covers the year in review and what to expect in the year ahead. And no doubt AI is going to be a big part of that. Finally, very much thanks to Mike, CA, Chris, and Justin. And thanks all of you for joining us.